Local reaction is pouring in to the Carney government's first federal budget. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Ryan Benazzo alongside Haley Perreault. The budget was unveiled by the finance minister yesterday. It's a massive spending plan meant to steer the country through major economic uncertainty.
But it'll also cause the deficit to balloon to more than $78 billion. So what does it mean for people here in northwestern Ontario? Ryan Graham has been out gauging some of the reaction, and he joins us now in studio. Ryan, what did you hear?
Well, I spoke today with an LU economics professor as well as the head of the local Chamber of Commerce. As you'd expect, they've identified some pros and cons. While there's no specific support for the tariff-ravaged forestry sector, there are some positives when it comes to critical minerals, and Thunder Bay may benefit from some big infrastructure and housing investments. For the region of northwestern Ontario, the federal budget offers both opportunity and questions as the region seeks to catch its share of the investment wave. Chamber of Commerce President Charlotte Robinson outlined some of the significant pros and cons that we are now faced with.
I think the biggest thing for our area is around critical minerals. There were a number of pieces related to critical minerals, expanding the different types of critical minerals that will be eligible for the critical minerals tax credit. So those are all things that are good for us, something we see businesses here taking advantage of, particularly on biofuels that may help our forest sector. There's also the new Trade Diversification Corridors Fund, which could potentially provide some additional support for our port.
Conversely, our region may be negatively affected by a reduction in the number of temporary foreign workers, as well as a lack of support from the federal government on small business tax credits. Professor of Economics at Lakehead University, Livio Di Matteo, further explains this multifaceted situation.
The mantra of this budget is spend less to invest more. In terms of how that'll impact the region, there is nothing specifically in the budget that says there'll be this much money for Thunder Bay, but a place like Thunder Bay, communities in northwestern Ontario are going to have to keep a pretty close eye on the various infrastructure programs that are going to be announced.
Meanwhile, NOMA President Rick Dumas agrees that the federal investments represent a critical opportunity for their 37-member municipalities to ensure they continue to grow, attract workers, and remains the engine that powers Ontario's and Canada's future. Ryan Graham, TBT News.
Members of Parliament, including the 2 Liberals and 1 Conservative from our region, will soon vote on the Carney budget. Opposition Kenora MP Eric Malillo says he has some serious concerns about the size of the deficit. While on the other side of the House of Commons, Liberal Cabinet Minister Patty Hajdu laid out the positives.
I have to say for Northern Ontario, it really met the mark, in particular in the space of investment and community infrastructure, whether it's roads, bridges, community centers, and even a specific fund for a co-investment with provinces and territories on hospital infrastructure.
This budget includes a deficit of $78 billion and $90 billion of more spending, and it pushes our total debt to the point where the federal government will now be spending more on the interest on that debt than they do on healthcare. So those are major concerns I have with the budget.
Anishinaabe Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler and Deputy Grand Chief Bobby Narcisse were both planning to speak with TBT News today about the federal budget as well, but unfortunately they were called away from day 2 of the Nan Chiefs Fall Assembly due to personal obligations and weren't available to media today. The Assembly continued on without them at the Superior Inn, with morning discussions about Nan Chiefs' fears that legislation born out of the Provincial Bill 5 and Federal Bill C5 will further hurt their sovereignty, especially when it comes to projects around the Ring of Fire. Chiefs from communities near the mining area voiced concerns about the lack of communication from both levels of government, despite the increased media attention on the Ring of Fire.
And it just goes to show you and tell us, we're not listening to you guys. We're going ahead with this. Can't we do something more direct until such time you sit down with us? Because what I'm saying is put a moratorium over the whole Treaty Number 9. I don't know if that's possible.
Shortly afterwards, the NAN chiefs moved their meeting in camera to strategize a unified response to senior levels of government.
Thunder Bay Police confirm that an arrest has been made in connection with last week's murder at a home on College Street. The suspect was actually arrested by Scriber OPP last Friday after a break and enter at a home in Terrace Bay. The victim in the homicide has been identified as 67-year-old Maurice Bruins. Police say that Bruins may have interrupted a break and enter at his home when he was killed on October 30th. The suspect, 24-year-old Dwayne Ferris, has been arrested and charged with second-degree murder and break and enter. Police believe the accused then stole the victim's vehicle and traveled to Terrace Bay, where he committed another break and enter the day after the murder. OPP say Ferris was injured in an altercation during that break-in and was taken to hospital in Thunder Bay. The OPP have also laid charges against him for break and enter and assault with a weapon. He remains in custody, awaiting his next court date.
A divided city council narrowly approved additional funding for the new waterfront art gallery last night after a very tense debate.
The vote came after city staff assured council that the extra $2.5 million will only be released once the gallery shows that it's secured more outside funding. Jessica Clement has the details.
In an 8-5 vote, City Council approved giving the art gallery an additional $2.5 million under specific conditions. City Treasurer Carrie Greaves says the funds will be released in phases, with the gallery receiving $1.25 million in the first phase.
The first contribution from the Municipal Accommodation Tax Reserve Fund would only be released once the art gallery demonstrates that it has secured sufficient funding to achieve a partial opening of the facility. The second contribution from the Renew Thunder Bay Reserve Fund would be released once the partial opening has been achieved and the art gallery has demonstrated that full project funding is in place.
Current River Councillor Andrew Folds reiterated that the waterfront gallery is not a city project. Through a lease agreement, the city's role is to act as a landlord. Folds says the funds are an investment in the community's culture, adding that the city has long supported sports facilities.
We have lots of sports fields. We have lots of sports buildings, and we're making investments in sports buildings. We've got lots of rinks. And most of those are almost entirely supported on the tax base. And I think it is about time that we honor the fact that not everybody's strength is being an athlete. Some people, their strength is something else. This will be a place that is theirs.
However, at-large councillor Trevor Grutuga says the numbers just don't add up. He notes along with the previous $5 million, the city also spent $3 million on infrastructure. Greaves says Grutuga was correct, but pointed out there was provincial funding attached.
That doesn't matter. So that was $5 million plus $3 million in infrastructure. That's $8 million plus $1 million in interest. That's $9 million plus $2.5 million. That's $11.5 million. So people want to say 10 cents on the dollar. I really question. I hope they're not math teachers. I'll tell you that, because that's not 10 cents on the dollar.
At-large councillor Shelby Chung says she understands residents' frustration when they hear about more spending, but emphasized this funding isn't coming from the tax base.
What I think we have working for us is that we do have the Renew Thunder Bay Fund that isn't going to be borne on the tax base, and we also have the MAT tax. These are tourism dollars that we're using for tourism products.
City staff are expected to be in talks with officials from the art gallery soon to identify what a partial opening will look like. Jessica Clement, TBT News.
Thunder Bay's indoor turf facility officially has a name, the T-Baytel Multiplex. That was decided last night when council voted unanimously in support of a 10-year naming rights deal with the city-owned telecom company. T-Baytel will pay $50,000 a year for 10 years, totaling $500,000 over the term of the agreement. The majority of the funding for the project to date has come from city reserves, a $3.3 million debenture from T-Baytel, and $500,000 from the CEDC. A special T-Baytel dividend of $4.5 million was also moved into the turf facility fund. Last night, at-large councillor Mark Bentz asked why it's now being called a multiplex.
We've been calling this the indoor turf for a very long time. I'm just wondering why the change and what multiplex actually means.
This name really symbolizes the, multiplex being multiple uses, multiple sports coming together under one roof, together as a community. I also understand that there is some symbolism in the telecommunications world, which TBT would be interested in, as combining technology and multiple signals into one powerful transmission.
TBT and the city will hold a joint event tomorrow at the community auditorium to celebrate the naming agreement.
Thunder Bay Police and other emergency responders were called to a collision on Memorial Avenue last night involving a car and 2 pedestrians. It happened shortly after 6:30 near the High Street intersection. According to city police, 2 people were sent to hospital after they were struck by a vehicle. The 2 pedestrians suffered non-life-threatening injuries and fortunately have since been treated and released. The car was left with a smashed windshield and had to be towed away. Police say the driver hasn't been charged.
Grade 8 students from Valley Central School honored fallen military members this morning at the Mountain View Cemetery.
It's part of an annual tradition before Remembrance Day, where the kids clean military headstones and reflect on the importance of their sacrifice. Here's Reagan Johnson with the story.
As part of the No Stone Left Alone project, 5 different schools will be cleaning headstones of veterans and other deceased in cemeteries around the city. Valley Central Public School was at the Mountain View Cemetery, putting in effort and time to honor those who have fallen for this country. Doing service such as this gives the youth a greater understanding of Canadian history and the importance of our veterans.
My classmates and me are cleaning all the tombstones and graveyards that the soldiers that sacrificed their life to make our country great. Important because they've done so much, they sacrificed their life, and just to show our respect to them.
It's good for them to have a better understanding of why we have freedom in Canada. We're learning not just about the veterans that served, but the history of the poppy as well. They're getting a full scope of why we honor and celebrate Remembrance Day.
Each one of these graves was a person. There is a person buried there for the most part, not in all, but for the most part there's a person buried there. They had a life in what they did. I think it's important. It's one of our legacies. We want to make sure people don't forget. That's the only way wars are prevented, is people remembering how bad they are.
It makes it feel really great to at least be able to give some part back to the soldiers that fought for us and whatnot. And yeah, I think it teaches a lot of grit to us and appreciation for what we have now, that we don't have to go into war.
Not only were the 8th graders cleaning headstones, they also left tokens of remembrance. Students were given cement medallions to paint and leave on veterans' headstones. The public is invited to take time leading up to Remembrance Day to visit a cemetery and view the gravestones and hundreds of medallions. Lest we forget. Reagan Johnson, TBT News.
Such an important act of remembrance and reflection there. Now, Fiona, it was a fairly nice day, especially to start for doing outside activities, as it was pretty sunny earlier today.
Yeah, we had a lot of sunshine this morning, maybe a little bit more cloud this afternoon, but temperatures were actually a couple of degrees above seasonal. We did top out with a high of 6 this afternoon, and that was after an early morning low of 0. So even our overnight lows are warmer than expected. Now, we did see a few periods of rain last night. No wet snow, just rain. Stayed above the freezing mark. But this afternoon, winds really picked up. Now, we started the day from the west-northwest at about 14 kilometers per hour. As the afternoon progressed, the wind increased to about 30, but there were gusts up to 50 so a little bit blustery during the afternoon hours. If we take a look at what's going on across the region at this time, temperatures are hovering right around the freezing mark for the most part. Now, Fort Frances started out as one of the coolest spots in the region. They had an early morning low of -3, warmed up to 6. They're currently down to about 3 Celsius since the sun has gone down. Everywhere else, temperature really didn't move a whole lot, especially as you head further north. Red Lake had a low of 0, a high of 2, and they're already back to the freezing mark with just a few clouds. As you head further east into Sioux Lookout, Armstrong, and Greenstone, the conditions were fairly cloudy, And Greenstone had a few brief showers, but the temperature there has been fluctuating between 1 and 2 Celsius since about 8 a.m. this morning. So not a huge warm up during the daylight hours and not a lot of movement. Along the North Shore, we're just a couple of degrees above the freezing mark. Marathon and Wawa at 2. Sault Ste. Marie, guess you'd call it the hot spot. They topped out with a high of 7. They're currently sitting at 6 Celsius. They had light rain for most of the morning, and it's been mostly cloudy this afternoon as the rain that we saw last night moved through and headed out. Now, tonight in the city of Thunder Bay, it's going to be quite a bit cooler, a low of -6, and wind chills will feel like -10. That's with winds a little bit gusty to start, 20 to 40 km for most of this evening, but tapering off a little. They'll hover a little closer to the 15 to 20 km for most of the overnight hours. Then for the second half of the week, well, unfortunately, if you've been liking these beautiful temperatures, you're not going to be thrilled with this. Daytime highs are going to start to slip just below the freezing mark, and it comes with a first real shot of snow. Not tonight, but very, very soon. And I will have more details on that later on in the news hour.
Okay, thanks a lot, Fiona.